Hello everyone. Today I am going to explain about example of ductility fracture and brittle fracture. Fracture. Fracture is the separation or fragmentation of solid body into two or more parts under the action of stress. It can be considered a made up of two components. One is crack indentation and other one is crack propagation. Crack indentation means starting of a small crack in a material. Example, crack indentation means if you bend a paper slip many times, first small line appear. That small line is crack indentation and other one is crack propagation. This is growth of the crack after it has started. In the paper slip example also, first small cracks forms. If you bend again and again, crack will form again. Big crack become bigger. So finally it's break. That is called crack propagation. Two type of fracture. One is ductility and brittle fracture. Ductile fracture, which the material undergoes plastic deformation before breaking, that is called ductile fracture. When you pull a steel rod first, it elongates, then necking occurs, finally it breaks. Material stretches and form necking. So, crack propagation is very slow and energy absorption is high. This is ductility fracture. And one more thing, ductility fracture is safer because it gives warning before failure. So it's very useful for in the structural and many construction field. Now moving on, example of ductile fracture. I give some example of ductility fracture. Mild steel rod in tensile stress, reinforcement bar in construction, aluminum wire stretching, copper wires twinning before break, car body panel during accident. These are some example of ductile fracture. What is mild steel rod in building? That is structural steel used in construction bend and stretch before it breaks. Basically, ductile fracture material bend or stretch first, then breaks before breaking. And other one is reinforcement of bar. The steel bars can bend significantly during heavy load before failure. And other one is aluminum wire. We see the picture. Aluminum wires stitched when pulled hard before final breaking. And car body panel during accident. Car metal panel and deformed instant of suddenly breaking. So energy absorb and it's absorb energy and protect the passenger. These are the example of real life example of ductile fractures. And next one is brittle fracture. Brittle fracture is type of fracture in which the material breaks suddenly without much plastic deformation, and it absorbs energy of very low but crack propagation is very short. I already told that what is crack propagation. Crack growing door crack grow of the crack after it started. That is the crack propagation is very fast, but sudden failure without warning. Example, if you hit a glass plate, it breaks immediately without bending. So brittle fracture is dangerous because it happens suddenly. Real life examples of brittle fracture. Basically, materials break suddenly without bending or stretching. There is no warning, it's just cracks and break. See there's some example of brittle fractures. Crack breaking suddenly, glass breaking suddenly, ceramic plate cracking, cast iron pipe breaking, and chalk spanning without bending. These are the example of brittle fracture. Glass is if you hit a glass plate, it breaks immediately without bending. That is the crack breaking suddenly. Ceramic plate cracking is suddenly when drop the ceramics, it's cracked created. Then cast iron water pipe crack. It can crack suddenly under impact or stress. These are images. The concrete beam cracking that show very little bending before cracking. This example of real life example. And moving on, ductile to brittle transition. This is example of real historical moment. We know Titanic ship was broken the time the ship hit iceberg is very cold water because of very low temperature. Steel become less ductility. Steel changed from ductility to brittle. Now moving on, ductility to brittle transition. We all know that historical example of Titanic disaster. Steel loses ductility in cold condition. It undergoes due to brittle transition. Titanic material composition, the steel had higher sulfur and phosphorus content, so it more brittle. But so then iceberg collision created high stress, causing cracks to propagate quickly. Normally, ductile material deform before fracture, but in cold condition, steels behave like a brittle material. Cracks formed and spread rapidly across the plates. There was no significant plastic deformation before failure. The Titanic disaster is a historical example of brittle fracture due to low temperature enrichment and rapid crack propagation. So, that importance of material selection and temperature consideration is in engineering design. Ductile fractures give warning before failure, but brittle fracture is without warning, suddenly crack forms. So, all engineers prefer ductile material for safety and understand the brittle fracture and ductile fracture. It's its help in safe design of structures. Thank you all.